Now, proposed new BEE regulations will promote corruption and harm service delivery. That's a dramatic allegation. The Institute of Race Relations Head of Policy Research, Anthea Jeffery, is here, and she's going to tell us, Anthea, good evening to you, why you believe that.
Well, let's just make it clear what we're talking about. We're talking about procurement by the state. And the National Treasury has just come up with draft regulations which would change the formula by which tenders are to be assessed. As it is at the moment, out of 100 points, there are 90 on price or functionality and 10 for BEE status. And the Treasury has said that means in practice a 10% escalation, that the state in those contracts is paying 10% above what it would otherwise do. Now the idea is that the formula will change and it will be 50% for price, or rather 50 points for price, 50 points for BEE status, which suggests that there'll be a 50% markup, as it were, for BEE.
Or there could be a 50% markup, not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but that's the way the Treasury has long resisted attempts to push up the BEE weighting, precisely because it says when it's 10 points, it leads to 10%. So I think it will probably perhaps be unusual if 50 points doesn't lead to 50%. And the concern there is, of course, that affects service delivery, because if the government is paying more on some contracts, there is less revenue over to buy other goods and services. You pay too much for one school, you have less available to pay for textbooks or what other goods might be needed. And why it might promote corruption, it shouldn't necessarily follow, but there does seem to be a problem of that kind. And so, for example, you've had Pravin Gordhan complaining about a vast inflation of prices under the existing rules, with the government paying 40 million rand for a school that ought to cost 15 million rand. Gwede Mantashe, the Secretary General of the ANC, saying this thing of having a bottle of water that you can buy for 7 rand, procured by the government for 27 rand, because you must have a middle-class person with a business, is not on. But we're not halting it, we're going on and entrenching it and making it probably more of a problem.
So Andrew, one of the things that comes top of mind, of course, is the recent Kandla saga and news breaking out that houses that should have cost about 100,000 rand to construct came in at about 6 million rand to construct. And this kind of narrative fits with that case study quite well. What are you putting on the table as an alternative? What are you suggesting should be done instead?
We think that BEE is just not working for the poor in particular, that it always has had a focus on a narrow elite, now even more so with these kinds of rules. So let us rather do something that will help the great majority. And our idea is economic empowerment for the disadvantaged, or EED. And some of the ways in which that would work would be, for example, we put our focus on growth rather than redistribution, and we give EED points to businesses that expand, that put up a new plant, a new factory, a new shopping centre, or even a new shop. That we also give EED points to businesses that either sustain the jobs that they're offering, or better still, increase the number of jobs that they're offering. And that we think it's vitally important that we should change the whole way in which education is being managed, because schooling is so poor. So why not give parents education vouchers paid for by the state, which would give parents a choice about what school they want to send their children to, put pressure on all schools to up their game, be more efficient and effective to attract pupils, and then give business EED points for contributing to those vouchers, for topping up the amount of money that's available to the poorest.
There's a political dimension here, perhaps. You mentioned Pravin Gordhan resisting it when he was at the Treasury. Now there's a new finance minister, Nhlanhla Nene. Does this indicate that he doesn't have the clout that Pravin Gordhan had in resisting the increased BEE component?
I think it's probably more that we are now very much in the radical second phase of the National Democratic Revolution. This contributes to it. It's part of trying to make sure that there's a complete shift, a redistribution, as it were, from white business, believed to be white though on the whole its business is owned by institutions rather than individuals, to black South Africans. And obviously there's a need to provide redress, but we need to make sure that the way we're doing it is a way that helps to advance the economy, encourage jobs, and not in fact lead to the state wasting money on procurement in the way we've seen it in Kandla and elsewhere.
Are we perhaps not overlooking a counter-argument which might go along the lines that black-owned businesses can actually be efficient and can actually charge market-related prices? And if that is the case, presuming those things can happen, then a 50% weighting on prices isn't actually going to have all the negative effects that you've put on the table.
Of course it's possible for black business to be efficient and effective. The trouble is that the way we're actually trying to boost businesses without in many ways providing the kind of foundation that you need. I remember a study done by Finmark Trust a little while ago saying the real formula for success in business, excellent schooling, good tertiary education, going into a business that exists, a formal business, learning networks, learning skills, and then starting up your own business. And when we try to shortcut that process and and also, as it were, the States has a huge incentive now to try and build up black business in the shortcut way. The risk is that it leads to this kind of price inflation and to less efficiency than there should be.
Just a quick one, Anthea. Is there any sign that anyone's listening to you? Do you think your position will have any effect?
Well, we hope so. It's very important, I think, that we should try and think out of the box. We've been trying BEE now for many years. We've seen that it does benefit the few, but it doesn't help the many. We need something that will help the many, and that's what we're hoping that we can come to through the ideas that we're developing around EED.
That is Anthea Jeffery. She's the Institute of Race Relations Head of Policy Research.